Hey everybody, it's Greg LeBoeuf. Welcome to another episode of Awaken the Protect Our Within. And today I want to talk to you, it's a bit of a tongue twister, about trapped trauma and triggers.
So the big question was this: what do good people do when a society's laws and institutions fail to keep them safe from aggression and violence? How do you get through a growing number of angry, hateful, aggressive people and still remain physically, mentally, and emotionally strong and positive? That was the question, and this podcast will give you the answer. My name is Greg LeBoeuf, and welcome to Awaken the Protector Within.
Okay, so trapped trauma and triggers. So important to understand to help us get past the trauma of bullying, aggression, and violence. Now, there's a couple things. I'm really going to try to keep my thoughts clear so that you can understand and follow along, just because there's a lot of dimensions to this. So let's keep it simple. First, trauma exists on a sliding scale. Okay, we can have events and be part of, bullying, aggression, and violence that is low level, medium, or extreme. Now, what determines where the trauma lies on that sliding scale is not anybody else. It's you. You see, we all are unique, and that means we have our unique perceptions. There is no shared reality. There is only our personal reality. It is our perceptions of things. Our perception of things is based off so many different factors: our predisposition, our experiences, our belief systems, our value systems. Our perceptions of things and events can be skewed by something as simple as being dehydrated, or not having, eaten enough or fueled properly that day, or being exhausted from being overtired. All of these different things can make us more susceptible to traumas. They can make us more sensitive. They can make us, angrier. We've all get that, right? You have a day, you have any hangry. Everyone knows what it's like to be hangry. What I want you to understand about trauma is that already it's a perception. So we can experience something that to us and only us is very traumatic. To everybody else around us, they might not see the trauma. They might not understand the trauma. I want you to know this because I want you to understand it's okay. It's your reality. It's only about how it affects you. If I have an event, if somebody targets me and bullies me or torments or uses aggression or violence, I want you to understand something: that the single greatest human fear is to be debased or degraded by another human being especially in front of peers, family, friends, co-workers. I mean, that's trauma. That is the single greatest stressor. So all of these different circumstances, I could be tired, I could be distracted, I could be, it doesn't make a difference. It's just predisposition. But here I am living my life, and all of a sudden something happens. Somebody crosses my path that uses bullying, aggression, or violence. And to me, it's traumatic. Nobody else around me could see it that way. But it doesn't matter, because here's what I want you to understand. Now, we talked about trapped trauma and triggers. You see, when you experience a traumatic event, now remember, I'm talking about you perceive it as a traumatic event. It's great. Other people may agree with you. There's absolutely incidents that we can think about to be involved in a multiple assailant attack, to be stabbed, to be shot, have somebody attempt a sexual assault or a homicide, to be caught in a terrorist assault attack. Anything like that, many people are going to agree that would be traumatic. That would be horrifying. Okay? I just want you to understand that nobody else in the world has to see it as traumatic for it to affect you. That's my point. So you need to own this, that if it's traumatic to you, it's all relative, then you're going to have trauma and it's going to get trapped. So we must acknowledge that. So here's the thing. When we experience a traumatic event, I want you to know that you're going to experience a fear spike. Now, I've talked about this in other podcasts, but let's remind you of something here. The fear spike affects us. Okay, so whenever we experience trauma, we are having an increase, a spike in what? It is affecting us physically, it is affecting us psychologically, and it is affecting us biochemically. Okay, understand that. So I want you to think of this like dials. Think of dials on an equalizer, or like a volume dial. Okay, physically, mentally, psychologically, or sorry, I said mentally, psychologically, physiologically. So those three areas. When we experience it, even low-level trauma, the fact is we are perceiving this as trauma. We are experiencing this. Our innate survival system activates. We get this fear spike. I want you to think of it like these dials get set. Now, if we can't regulate the fear spike, guess what happens? An outside stimulus, an outside stressor, one of the greatest stressors that we can face, violence, aggression, and bullying, to be debased or degraded, especially in front of friends, family, peers, coworkers, that kind of thing, that outside stressor has a reaction. It affects our dials. Those dials, physical, psychological, and physiological, those dials get adjusted. They get cranked up. Now, depends on our perception. Did they get cranked up to a 3 or 4, or did they get cranked up to a 9 or 10? Okay, either way, what has happened though is that your body, your mind, your emotions, your spirit has had these dials set. Right? They've been altered. That's the trauma. Now, we come out of the event and we're like, "Oh my God, thank God I'm safe. I'm all this I'm home. I'm secure. It's over." Now, even if you're going intellectually going, "You know what? Really, I mean, yeah, like I was scared, but you know, when I look back on it, really wasn't probably that big of a deal. I probably really wasn't in that much danger." So, 4 or 5 hours after that event, you finally go, "You know what? I'm okay. I'm over it. I'm back to normal." Then all of a sudden, 2 o'clock in the morning, you're wide awake, lying in bed in a puddle of sweat. You can't sleep. You can't eat. You can't focus. Everyone around you wakes up, sees you. They can tell you're visibly upset and shaken, and you can't even express to them why. You're like, I don't even know what's going on. I don't know what's the matter with me. It's like, oh, I just all of a sudden had this overwhelming panic attack or sense of anxiety or stress. It might even be a low-lying pulse of stress and anxiety that is now with you, and it seems like it's with you all the time. You can't shake it. What has happened? The trauma is trapped. Those dials, when we experienced that conflict, that crisis, no matter where those dials got set at, that is literally trapped inside of us. It is locked in your psychology. It is locked in your biochemistry, your physiology. It is locked in there. And of course, that is locked in the physical. When the psychological and the biochemical activate, when those get triggered, the same physical manifestation of those symptoms, of those, those feelings, they affect us physically. So, and we think, but I'm safe intellectually. I know I'm safe. And when I think back, it was really nothing. It doesn't matter. That was a stimulus response. It becomes like a conditioned thing inside you. It's trapped. And guess what? Most times people go, I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't know why I'm feeling this way. I don't know why this just happens. I'm good for 4 or 5 hours, and then all of a sudden, I'm having the stress or anxiety or the panic attack because something triggered it. You see, the trauma gets trapped, and we can sit there after and use our very powerful brains. And our brains try to rationalize things away. Our brains break it down intellectually and go, well, listen, yeah, it was a little scary at the time, but realistically, I was behind the counter. The person never got out of their car, whatever, and I was never really in any danger. And so, what's the matter? Like, it's fine. I'm okay. Our brains try to intellectually and rationally talk our way through it. And maybe it makes sense. And maybe go, yeah, it totally makes sense. I'm on board with that. But in the moment that it actually was happening, you experienced the fear spike. Their stimulus, their stressor created a reaction in you psychologically, biochemically, which affected you physically, and that got trapped. Now, I want you to know this. In that event, your body was pulling in information through all of your sensory faculties. The smells in the air, the sounds, the feeling, just if you got goosebumps, if you had the hair on the back of your neck stand up, if the loss of saliva production, you had dry mouth, you had shakes in your hands, you were hearing background noise, music that was on, a song that was on. It happened, outside of a restroom or something. You heard a toilet flush or you heard a sink tap turn on. Your sensory faculties were pulling in information at a rapid rate because it was trying to figure out all of the threats around you. It was scanning everything because that is your innate survival mechanism, trying to pulling as much information and going, what's important here? What piece of this information do I need to stay alive? So in those moments, it is now connecting to those dial settings. It is now connecting. It's building a trigger. And so guess what? All of a sudden now, it's 3 days later or a day later or later that night or a month later or a year later. And you're sitting there and you're out and you're having the time of your life surrounded by people you love with no danger. You're just absolutely comfortable. And all of a sudden, boom, you're in a panic attack. All of a sudden you have anxiety overwhelm your body as fast as you can blink. And you're like, what happened? What happened could be something as simple as a smell. And that smell was a trigger that is associated with that trauma. And guess where your dials go? Your dials flip right back to where they were that's in that moment of that traumatic event. Sometimes they, over time, can actually get worse because as we have and experience little triggers that can happen subconsciously, somebody can just say something. Somebody can move a certain way. Somebody can, a smell. It's like a cold air and all of a sudden you get goosebumps and those goosebumps trigger and bring you right back to that traumatic event. It can happen in a dream that you're not even aware of. You know, anything. It can be the temperature of a room. Your body recorded every single piece of stimulus. And those can all become triggers. And those triggers are trapped if you do not understand how to process and delink the memory of the event and the event. You have to delink memory from emotion. You have to break the connection. Otherwise, that trapped trauma and those triggers will always be there. And you have no control. It's like a big, strong, aggressive puppy that snaps off the leash or that comes off the leash. And it comes off the leash at the worst times. And it comes off the leash at unpredictable times because they're triggers. So if we just kind of overview a bit, understand that when we experience something that is to us traumatic, it doesn't matter if it's traumatic to anybody else or not. It doesn't matter if they try to intellectually or rationalize away why it shouldn't be traumatic to you. If it was traumatic to us, it's traumatic. It's our perception. It's our experience. It is what it is. And I want you to understand that your dials got set, even low level. To live your life with even low-level trauma that is trapped and triggers that you can't control, that at a moment's notice, let that puppy off the leash and just flood you with even low-level anxiety, stress, or fear, is a horrible way to live. We must process through trauma, not repress it, not ignore it. Intellectually isn't enough to just understand or to intellectualize what happened. You have to process through what happened. Okay, so the trap trauma and triggers, the first step of this is understanding that it literally gets locked inside our physiology. Now, that's the part I really want to explain to you, but of course, to say, well, listen, if you're experiencing this, you're like, how do I delink memory from emotion? How do I how do I train the puppy? How do I get him on the leash and keep him on the leash and control this response? Well, it all comes back to understanding and regulating the fear spike. We have to regulate the response. You can be trained to learn to anticipate and know the fear spike, know what it is, know that it's going to happen. You can be given the tools and the understanding to be able to regulate it, and then you can put in the practice to actually get control, to functionalize those tools so that you can actually regulate that. You can do that before you ever experience a trauma, or you can do that after you've experienced the trauma. In my case, when I learned it, it was after I'd experienced my trauma, and my trauma was severe. And so it was a process of having to learn to go backwards and delink the memory from the emotion, and to kind of, learn to regulate my body's physiology and my psychology after the fact. Okay? But that is the process that you must undertake. Okay, so listen, unfortunately in this time frame of a podcast, I can't, go through that whole entire process with you, but it's not the most important part. Control follows awareness. This podcast was about awareness. If this makes sense to you, and if it makes sense to you, I'm talking about makes sense to you in that you're experiencing this. You're living through this. That's what I'm talking. That's the aha moment where you go, damn, this is why, for no apparent reason or obvious reason, I'm all of a sudden find myself lying on the kitchen floor and I can't move. Something triggered it. Yeah, oh yeah, I had an event, but that was 5 years ago. That was 10 years ago. I've been blessed to be able to work with a lot of people who have come through a lot of different types of traumas. And I will tell you universally that this is something we need to gain understanding of, because I've dealt with individuals that experienced the trauma, and after it, intellectually, they're like, oh, I'm good. That, you know what? I was like almost laughing it off. And then for the next year of their life, have been out shopping at West Edmonton Mall and found themselves underneath a table in a food court, unable to move. That when we don't understand, when that tripwire is hit inside of us and we don't understand why, and all we know is we've just completely lost control of our mind and our body, we think we're going crazy. That amplifies the trauma. So it is so important for us to understand that trauma gets trapped, and so do the triggers. Okay? But that alone, that awareness, will set you free, because now you can do the next thing, which is to take control over it. And how you take control over it is to learn to regulate your response, to delink the memory from the emotion. And there's a process for how we do that. Listen, I'm going to end it there. I hope, again, I can bring some awareness to this, which will then lead you to some control. I'll say this, that we have a free online course, a workshop course, that takes you through some of the background of this stuff. It shares 3 main things with this and goes into a little bit more detail. If you haven't had a chance to check that out, please feel free to check that out. And the other side of it is, feel free to contact me and allow me to show you and help navigate you the way somebody did for me, because there is a way through the trauma, the pain, and the suffering. We can get past this. All right, everybody, I'm going to leave it there. That's it. Thanks again so much. Please, if you know anyone that might benefit from hearing this, share this message, follow us on iTunes, rate us, subscribe to us, and we'll see you next time, and hopefully keep delivering some of this great information for you. That's it, everybody. Until next time, stay safe, stay ready, and remember, getting off that X, it's only one step away.
Want to awaken your protector within? If so, then head to awakentheprotectorwithin.ca and get your free Off the X training today.